have at all. Oh, let's go recording. All right. They don't care how much experience you have at all. It's just, if you don't have a terminal degree, they're not interested. So in a very much hold my beer spirit, I said, okay, I'm going to go earn my doctorates. And so 3 years ago, I started that. And after 3 years of slogging through that, I said, okay, this is not going fast enough for my liking. So last August, I left my full-time role at Pluralsight, which Pluralsight had bought A Cloud Guru back in, I guess, 2021, I think. So I had moved over to Pluralsight, and in August, I decided to leave Pluralsight and just focus on my doctoral studies full time and just kind of bang it out. So that's exactly what I'm doing right now. This summer, I'm going to be starting on my dissertation work, and I have a few different ideas, but it's probably going to be in the intersection of AI, ethics, privacy, and data security. That's a pretty rich and fertile space right now. So prior to foolishly jumping back into full-time school, I worked at this little company called A Cloud Guru, and I did some stuff there. And one of the things, actually two of the courses that turned out pretty well was the Solutions Architect Professional. It should be going end of life right about now. I don't know if it is or not, but it was created back in 2019, 2020, something like that. But that particular course was very popular for a while. It was one of the most popular courses in the industry. And then Brock Tubry and I created the Certified Machine Learning specialty course on that platform as well. And that turned out to be pretty well received. But one of the most challenging courses, I would say the most challenging courses that I've ever created, was the Introduction to Machine Learning. And I'm sure you're saying, oh, come on, it's an intro course. How hard can it be? And for some context, we have to go back in history a little bit, back to the early 90s. And here I am, graduating high school. My future was certain, but I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do, what career I wanted to build for myself. So like most other people in high school, I took this interest assessment survey, you you answer all these questions and they tell you what career you'd be best at. And so I did that, and it pointed me to engineering. And I also like computers. So I figured computer engineering was the career and profession for me. So I was only 4 short years away from my certain destiny, right? Well, these two characters had other plans. This is Isaac Newton and Gottfried Leibniz, and I think they probably have some of the best hair that I've ever seen in classical mathematics. But they also fought over who invented calculus. And the one thing that they did agree on, though, is they did agree to dash my hopes onto the rocks forever by crushing my spirit with calculus. Come the fall of 1992, I enrolled in my freshman year of studies at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. And part of the computer engineering program there is you had to have calculus. So I said, okay, let's go ahead and do calculus. I failed miserably. Not to be discouraged, got right back up on that horse. Spring 1993, I enrolled again, and I failed miserably. Twice, 2 in a row, I failed. I did all the study groups, I did all the office hours, I read all the books. It just didn't click for me. And back then, there wasn't any sort of YouTube content that kind of, here, let me do this in a visual manner. It was just so foreign to me. It was literally Greek letters, and I just didn't get it. I couldn't get it. And so I felt that I was being locked out because of my own dumbness and my own stupidity. I couldn't figure out calculus. And so I felt like there was no way that I was going to get that computer engineering degree. And that really put me in kind of a depression, trying to figure out, okay, what do I do with my life now? I thought I was destined to become a computer engineer. Well, after some soul searching, I changed my major area of study to management information systems. And at UAB at that time, this was a business degree with an IT focus. The important part, though, is they did not have a calculus requirement. And as it turned out, I really loved that. I really loved the human aspect, the more applying this technology to business problems. I really enjoyed that. And in no time, I went from academic probation to being on the dean's list, and I ended up graduating with honors with an MIS degree. And that particular background allowed me to go on this crazy journey that I've been on with all these great companies and interesting projects and so forth. And oftentimes I kind of reflect on that and say, okay, what if I would have just kind of brute force stuck with computer engineering? And my fear is that I would be in some beige building, designing the next version of some crazy keyboard or something like that. And that interest assessment that I took in high school that said I would like engineering, well, it turns out that I like problem solving and solving puzzles. And at that time, engineering was just this generic occupation that fit neatly in that particular neighborhood. Okay, a few years later, probably more than a few, I was hearing a lot about machine learning, and I decided that I wanted to learn about machine learning. I had a few motivations. Number one, there seemed to be a lot of hype around machine learning. It was going to save the world. It was going to put us all out of jobs. I had to know a little bit more. The second was, from everybody's description, it seemed like this fantastic magic. You know, how could this really be? What was it really? I knew it wasn't magic, but what was it really? And then finally, I wanted to build a superhuman brainiac system that could pick stocks and suggest sports bets and generally outsmart everyone else. Look, I'm just being honest. That was part of my original motivation. I wanted to see how I could leverage it for my own benefit, right? So I did what most people do, and I Googled it, and I found many resources for beginners, and I researched all those courses, and eventually I found an instructor that was very highly credentialed and had all the degrees and all the publications, and I decided to give it a go. So here I am, the ML newbie, all excited and ready to learn. Introduction to machine learning, here I come. Well, about 10 minutes into the course, the instructor breaks out calculus. And it was this person's first language. And they explained ML concept just effortlessly by writing these equations on this crazy little whiteboard, this antique type whiteboard thing that kind of crumbly recorded it on the screen. And he'd say things like, well, this of course is intuitive because factor this, prime this, sigma this, second derivative that. And I started getting a very sinking feeling. And on top of that, many of the compound technical terms that were strung together, this instructor would try to explain them using more math equations, more Greek letters, and so forth. And several years later, as I kind of forged my own path with machine learning, I discovered that a lot of these very complex, scary sounding terms really aren't that scary when you know what they really mean. And they're much simpler than they sound. Now, this instructor wasn't bad. They were just using the words that made most sense to them and presumably made perfect sense to the typical students that were signing up for that particular class, be it, you know, the math people. And so all these things started stacking up and just kind of gave me this really disappointing feel. I couldn't find the suitable content. The vernacular, well, I just didn't understand it. There was this giant learning curve that I was trying to go against. Not only am I trying to learn the math or the mathematics or the machine learning concepts, but I was trying to go back and basically teach myself calculus 101, 102, 103, and so forth, so that I could even understand the context. And that was very difficult. The situational learning wasn't there. I mean, the instructor kind of provided an example of here's how this thing works, but they didn't give concrete physical examples of how it would work in the real world. I didn't have the confidence. And then most importantly, something that has plagued me all my career is this imposter syndrome concept. I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not worthy of being here and understanding this stuff. So I was totally dejected again. I figured that it just wasn't possible for me to learn the various machine learning methods, and I should just leave it to the PhDs. Well, fast forward another year or so, and this is my daughter, and this is a picture of when she was 3. She's 12 now, and this was taken at a local bagel shop near where we lived. And at that time, on that particular day, they ran out of their usual plates and metal forks and spoons for some reason, and all they had were plastic plates and sporks. You know, that kind of unholy union between a spoon and a fork. Well, this was the first time in her 3 years on the planet that she had ever seen such a thing, and it completely blew her mind. Now, you and I have been around enough to know that sporks aren't really good at either job, but according to her, this was the perfect utensil. And it was about that same time that I also have a similar mind-blowing experience. In the same way that a spork is kind of this weird hybrid, maybe there was also this weird hybrid way that I could understand these complex machine learning concepts without having to go to 4 years of advanced math. And let me give you an example. When I was a kid, I had this. It's a Viewmaster. It's been around since, I don't know, I think they were invented in 1939, something like that. And maybe you had one as well. And I would spend hours gazing through that thing and just marveling at all the little detail and the 3D scenes. And it kind of took my imagination away. And it probably, if you had one, it probably didn't take you very long to realize how it worked. And the 3D effect was created by 2 slightly offset photographs on opposite sides of the little circular disc that you put in the device. Fast forward to today, and I have one of these things, an Oculus Quest 2. And I also spend hours gazing into it and marveling at these images, but I don't regard it as some strange magic. It works the same way as the Viewmaster that was created back in 1939. Just 2 slightly offset images. And much of machine learning is like this. This is something that I figured out, is a little bit of understanding around the mechanics can go a long way to understanding even the most cutting edge of AI today. And it's okay if you don't speak math. There's a way to convey those things without having to do it in an equation. So I spent the next year or so poking around ML websites and doing tutorials and slogging through academic papers. And I was teaching myself AI more or less via a brute force method. And one of the things that really helped for me was I dug into the origin stories of some of these AI algorithms and techniques and some of the personalities, and really had to understand, okay, what were the constraints they were working with in their time? And so seeing how those things developed over time and how they got embellished with more and more complexity and more computing power and our ability to handle data better, it really helped me see from how they were in a very primitive form. That helps me translate and helped me translate, okay, how do they work today? And also, I spent a lot of time, and this is how this helps me learn, is trying to find stuff that I don't know about and then match it up with either through simile or metaphor or some sort of historical context about stuff that I do know, so that it kind of clicks for me that, okay, I understand how a convolutional neural network works, for example. I understand how generative adversarial network works because I can visualize it. And I don't necessarily think about it in terms of a math equation or a differential equation. So when the opportunity came to create an introduction to machine learning course on ACG, I jumped at the opportunity to create that specifically for people who don't speak math as a first language. And so that's exactly what I did. I used graphics and simile and metaphor, and I like history. I'm kind of a history buff, so I like to go back in history and see the origin story of some of these things. And then I also created some follow-along demos and so forth. So it's still out on the platform. Again, I don't work for that company anymore. I think it's a pretty cool course. If you have a subscription, you might want to go check it out. If not, I'm not selling anything. So please, Margaret, don't ban me from future presentations. So the internet is going to be the internet. And some people became really, really offended that I was touting this intro to ML course where you didn't have to know advanced math. And I think their perspective was that unless you could prove out those machine learning algorithms at the most atomic level, you can't possibly understand how they work. And I, of course, disagree. And I contend that there are varying degrees of understanding, which are perfectly valid. You can't tell me that I don't know enough to understand something. For example, I'm not a gearhead. I don't know the slightest thing about compression ratios or thermodynamics, but I know enough to know how an internal combustion engine works. And that level of knowledge keeps me from doing stupid stuff like putting sugar in my gas tank or running my engine without oil. So haters aside, I received way more positive feedback. And fortunately, others really appreciated this alternative approach as well. And so that tells me that there's definitely an audience out there of folks that desperately want to learn some of these concepts, but maybe they're scared away because some of the existing material out there maybe presumes that you're starting with a deep mathematics background. Now, don't get me wrong, math is very important. If you want to become a machine learning engineer, you have to know the math. But if you're going to be simply sitting on maybe an ethics board of a corporation and your day job is maybe a marketing executive or something like that, it's really important, I think, that you know how some of these machine learning algorithms work from a mechanical standpoint, so you can get a better idea of what their limitations are. So then, you know, I was interested in the hype. Now, as Flava Flav says, don't believe the hype. It's not, it's all hype, right? It's just like other internet stuff. Magic, no, it's not magic at all. It really doesn't make sense, even for those of us who aren't math people. And finally, I think this is one of the most important takeaways from any machine learning courses. Knowing how ML works behind the curtain, you can better understand the limitations and pitfalls of certain ML approaches. Now, this is especially true as the barriers of entry to using ML get lower and lower, because now I can just invoke an API or something, and I don't really have to know what all that stuff is going behind the scenes. But I will most definitely tell you, if you happen to use ChatGPT, for example, to generate marketing content, you sure better proofread it before you post it, right? Continuing along with this automotive analogy, I may not be a gearhead, but if I want to drive my car around and do it legally, I have to take a driver's test and I have to have a driver's license. So I'm not advocating for people having to license themselves to use ML, but I think there's a responsibility here that we have to know a little bit how these algorithms work and some of the pitfalls. And this problem of unintended consequences struck Amazon itself. Back in 2014, they began developing a resume scanning or resume evaluation AI model. And the hopes were that they were getting a bunch of resumes and it was just overwhelming their recruiting staff. So they wanted to automate it a bit. So they fed in lots and lots of resumes from the people they had hired for the past 10 years. And this created a model that they could submit in new resumes, and it would rank them, or it would give them a series of ratings, a star rating. And then one of the things that they realized when they started using it and looking at the data is that it consistently gave higher scores to males rather than female candidates. Now, this was even in the case where the resume was relatively the same with regard to experience, skills, education, accomplishments, and so forth. And so they looked closer at this model, and what they found out is that commonly occurring terms that occurred on everybody's resume, like JavaScript and cloud computing, weren't really increasing the weights of the model. What was really impacting that particular evaluation was Women's Chess Club and St. Mary's College, which is a women's college, would score lower for some reason. And then masculine words like executed and captured would raise the score on these resumes. Now, to Amazon's credit, once they saw what was going on, they said, okay, time out, we're going to scrap this tool. They claim that they never used this particular tool to solely hire people or base a hiring decision. But nonetheless, the damage was kind of done. This has been recorded, and here I am talking about this thing on a presentation. Now, was the machine learning model evil? Was the training process evil? Was the data set evil? Well, no. In fact, it doesn't appear that anybody was doing anything nefarious here at all. The majority of those hired in the past 10 years were male. And so the training algorithm did what it was supposed to do and identify correlations. And it tuned itself to prefer male resumes because that's what the most common data was in the data set that Amazon said, here, hire more of these people. So this is a selection bias known as coverage bias. And generally, it means you don't necessarily include a full representation of the population that you want to evaluate in your training data. And it's a problem. It creates evaluation problems, like in this case. And it's not just limited to this case. There are other cases with regard to sentencing guidelines. You know, ML models have been used to do sentencing guidelines and so forth, like stuff like that. And this stuff really affects people's lives. So that's why it's really important to understand the types of ML algorithms and some of their limitations and vulnerabilities. And, you know, look, machine learning is not going to go away. We just need to be sure that we're on board with trying to make it better. Now, that was back in 2014. I think the article came out in 2018. We're much better off here in 2023, right? No, we're not. Not really. In fact, there's this database that's been established for these facepalm type events called the Artificial Intelligence Incident Database. And as of a few days ago, it had something like 2,000 entries in it. And it's sponsored by a nonprofit called the Partnership on AI. And this is a consortium designed to bring awareness to AI's impact on people and society. And it's about 103 different partners, and it definitely includes the usual suspects that you would expect to be in the industry right now. And the idea behind this is corporations don't want to do the wrong thing because it can really make them look foolish and you know, either public relations disasters or even worse, legal, or maybe there are cases where lives are impacted. Rather, this is an acknowledgement. The existence of this kind of facepalm database is an acknowledgement that we're still learning. And even the largest, most cutting edge companies are also in this same boat as well. And so that's why I believe it is very important for folks to learn, at least at a baseline level, how some of these algorithms work, because it's not just, you know, Harry Potter crazy magic. What is behind some of these things? What are some things that if you are as a business person are in a conference room and you're trying to decide, hey, do we want to implement facial recognition? Now, I know probably most of the folks here that I'm talking to are in Illinois, and you're subject to a much more stringent privacy rule than most of the other states around here. But even still, we need to know the legal ramifications as well as maybe some of the ethical ramifications. And that's why that particular intersection is really important for me, and I want to dig into it more. Now, does this mean that I'm against machine learning? I'm a Luddite. I don't want to, progress? Well, absolutely not. If we look at the history of AI, indeed the history of any innovation, it's all about failure, and failure equals progress. And this fail until I don't concept is even baked into some of the machine learning approaches because it's a good way to get better. There's something called a generative adversarial network, or GAN. And it literally has a component in there called the discriminator. And the discriminator's job is to look at the work of the generator, the piece of that particular process that's creating the thing, and basically give us a Caesar thumbs up, thumbs down, do better next time type evaluation. Now, if you've used some of the GPT models, you've benefited from the work of the generative adversarial network. So failure is kind of baked into these processes. Now, culturally speaking, we do not, oftentimes we do not really accept failure. Failure is not an option. And then it's something that weak or unambitious people do. They fail. They can't bootstrap their way up. And this can also be reinforced by this social media highlight reel, where it seems like everybody else is gliding around without the slightest stumble, right? So I personally feel like I have lots more failure to do. I failed at calculus twice, and yet I've still had an incredible IT career. And I'm sitting here talking about machine learning stuff. I failed Fortran, thank God. Then I learned C++, which was way more beneficial than Fortran. I failed my first attempts at the CSAP, the Certified Solutions Architect Professional, and the Certified Machine Learning Specialty. Yet somehow or another, I managed to put together some of the most popular courses at least a couple years ago in the industry. I've also been applying for a teaching job, a lecturer or an adjunct or whatever, and I've been robo-rejected 3 times so far. So that's still in process. Hold my beer. All right. So what? My suggestion, my advice is find a voice, find a machine learning training voice that meets you where you are. And it doesn't have to be my course or anything like that. There's an incredible amount of information out there, most of it free, that speaks to people at a variety of stages of where they are learning. And if you haven't found something that speaks your language, keep looking. And if you still can't find it, well, maybe you've stumbled across a niche that needs to be filled, and maybe you should create it. The next thing I would say is understand enough about ML to know the limitations. The more educated we can become about machine learning and the possible misuses and mistakes that it can make, the better we're going to be. And finally, don't let the math talkers scare you off. Unless you aspire to be a machine learning engineer and build these unique algorithms from the ground up, you don't necessarily need that 4 years of mathematics just to understand how these concepts work. And they'll take you a long way if you just understand some of the basic concepts. So this is the point where I challenge you to go and fail at something. I know that's kind of anticlimactic, but hey, that's the theme. Thank you very much. And maybe if we have questions or anything like that, maybe we want to save it to the very, very end. I'm not sure, but that's all I have.
Thank you, Scott. Like you said too, I wish this had been around when I was in school and was told that I'm not good any good at math, or when I was studying for the certified solution architect. I also failed that too. So embrace failure. I love it.
Yeah. Thank you.
I don't see any hands raised or chat if anybody does have questions or.
No, I was just going to say I failed calculus too, so I'm with you.
All right, Shafia.
Hello.
We're going to keep this rolling. I want you to explain how awesome you are and who you are and what you do. And then, I don't know, like give me some signal of when you want to like transition into unrecorded.
Sounds good.
From your ear, from your arm, still third, whatever it is, just let me know.
All right. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Some of you I have met before. For those who do not know me, I'm Shafia Zubar. I currently work as the Director for Supply Chain Cybersecurity at Johnson Controls. And my career started off as a software developer at Ericsson, where I was dating myself very much, voice over ATM applications. Now, clearly that protocol never really went anywhere. It was voice over IP that won the market. But I learned quite a lot from that. But from there on, I progressed into product management and then moved into information security. So securing systems, securing products is where my passion lies. And enter artificial intelligence and machine learning in all of this, because I'm looking at securing systems and risk around how to secure the systems. And if there is a risk right now at this point in time, it is around what we call machine learning, or what people call as artificial intelligence. And potentially, as we move further down, we'll have some additional emerging technologies like quantum computing that could pose much bigger security threats. But for now, we're focusing on machine learning. So Scott raised a very good point, right? Like, it is not that hard to learn machine learning, but it's not that easy either on the flip side. So you just need to find that right balance where you're failing, but also learning. So I'm going to bring up a couple of things that hopefully those who are creating any kind of machine learning models need to look out for. With that, I am then also going to go deeper into what exactly I mean by machine learning versus what do people call machine learning today. So let's get started. If PowerPoint behaves. Did you see anything move?
No.
I'm not even sharing anything.
Not yet.
Huh. How about now?
There we go. Agenda.
All right. I have
And let me know when you want to stop recording. Is now a good time or?
Now's a good time. Thank you.
All right.